What's up, guys? Today's deck profile is going to be on Fairies. Fairies has had me hyped for quite a bit now. When I saw Oberon and Titania, it was just really cool, and I couldn't wait to make like something really interesting together. I didn't actually go with the route I thought I was going to take, which was going to be the Reflect kind of Ruler's Memoria way. To have all the colors that you can possibly have, so that you can play all of your fairies. I actually found that like through a lot of testing with this version of the deck, your hand actually stays like a pretty decent size instead of just going to zero really fast. Because with Reflect Fairies, you play a couple Regalias, you drop the fairies, and then there's no real way to recover your hand. Black Moon's Fairy can sometimes help, or some of the other cards like Drawing Will Change the World can help. But the second your opponent plays like one Barrier of Shadows, you start really falling behind. It becomes really hard to use Change the World, and you don't really tap for stones often in fairies because you gotta win really quick. So I figured that a lot of those Reflect players were going either like kind of the heavy white aspect, so they were playing kind of Circle of Trust and focusing on Viviane. And then there was like the Reflect players that wanted to play the green fairy version where you focus on like King Oberon and Titania. And so I figured it doesn't really make sense to use one way over the other when you can essentially just get the best of both. And so I figured the only way I can have a ton of white while also having a ton of green was to use Kaguya to color fix the Moonbreeze Memoria into green. So that's why I'm using Kaguya. So just in case people don't know, Kaguya says that you can pay Moon as if it were green. And then other than that, if you play a Moon, you draw a card. I don't think I'm playing any Moon cards like Tsukiyomi in here. I still wanted to keep it really heavy on fairies because the second you start getting too techy, Water Sprite starts missing quite often. But you don't really use the J-Ruler side on this either much, but just in case people don't know what it does. For Kaguya's J-Ruler side, it still says you can spend Moon as if it were green, and it also says when you awaken a card, you put 2+1 counters on her. There's no awakening in this. I didn't run Elaine, so that effect is completely ignorable too. And then you can pay one light and colorless to prevent the next damage to her. That's always good if you want to just get her to swing in for a couple 700s late game. Because sometimes I do J-activate just to swing, but for the most part it's just for the color fix. And then her God Art rests all of your opponent's creatures, and then you untap all of your stones. So mainly it's just because of the color fix. You could use your J-Ruler as a body if you have to, which is always nice because kind of what I've noticed with Reflect lately is like even though Reflect's just an incredible ruler, I get kind of tired of using him in like any deck nowadays because I hate not being able to use my J-Ruler at all. Because in this deck you get color fix, just like kind of in a 12 Apostle deck I posted. It still feels like your ruler is really relevant, and if you never J-activate and just use it for color fix, it's still safe against Black Moonbeam also, so it didn't seem really necessary to use Reflect right now. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be good, it's just for this particular version that I wanted to run, I really preferred being able to be really kind of swarm heavy with the fairies without worrying that if somehow they wipe my board, I'm just losing the game. So in terms of the stones, there's of course 4 of the Fairies Memoria. This card says when it enters the field, you have to reveal a fairy in your hand or it comes in rested. That's not a problem, of course, because of the amount of fairies you run. And then it produces light, but you can produce any color in order to play a fairy. So this is what you want to hope to hit early. It just makes it easier to play all of the other fairies late game. But if you don't hit it, it's still not that big of a deal because Viviane can put them in the field. And it's really easy to keep Viviane alive now because of some of the new support cards, which I'll get into later. But the next one is just Moonbreeze Memoria. So this produces light and moon. In other words, with Kaguya, light, moon, and green. So you don't use the moon for anything in this deck, except for deactivating Kaguya, and her effect to negate. Oh, I completely looked over that, by the way. So Kaguya can also negate automatic abilities with paying 1 moon, and you can get the moon from the Moonbreeze Memoria. So it also produces green. So you get white, green, so you can play all of the white support cards while still playing stuff like the King Oberon and Circle of Trust, which I think is really strong. And Escort, which I think is one of the best cards in like that fairy's got. It's probably the best card in general. I think that card is insane. And then 2 First Fights Memoria. I wanted to always have the possibility of going turn 1 Wind Sprite. I think Wind Sprite in this version of the build is really strong, and I wouldn't want to risk having more light and hit one of those and not be able to play Wind Sprite instead of possibly hitting, like if you hit one of these and you play a Wind Sprite turn 1, turn 2, unless you hit the other one, which is really not likely, you can still tap the second light stone, because if you don't hit a first light, you're guaranteed a light. So you can tap the Wind Sprite, the other stone you hit, and this has colorless to play Viviane. So in the only situation you wouldn't be able to do that for Viviane on turn 2 would be as if you hit 2 of these. So I didn't really think like that possibility was enough to keep me from playing more light or anything. I was just okay with playing 2 of these. And in late game, there has been times where like I just needed one more Flame Sprite to win, but I was tapped out on all my stones except for like this and something else, and like a Moonbreeze. So I would just like tap for red and then play the Flame Sprite and be able to swing for games. So you know, with a whole board of like Vivianes and stuff, so the Flame Sprites like 600 are pretty big. But generally, yeah, its color fixing effect is also just nice. It's not, it doesn't happen all the time, but it's nice to have the option. It's better than having just a mono green. And then so for the fairies, I have 4 Wind Sprites. I originally wasn't going to play this in the Reflect version I was thinking of. I felt as though if you didn't hit this turn 1, it was just weaker every other turn. But it's really strong in this deck because even if you don't have a turn 1, you're guaranteed, I mean, you have to drop green fairies from your hand in order to pump up the field if you've already set up. So you need to focus on using Viviane to specifically put in the other colored fairies, and then you use Wind Sprite to kind of buff everything up late game. But early game, it's of course just to be able to play Viviane. It's also nice to be able to pay the light as the colorless cost for Oberon. So it's like you could do stuff like if you have a Fairies Memoria, a First Fight Memoria, and this on the field, you could tap, like if your opponent attacks like a Clockwork Soldier, which is like a really typical card to see this format because of Machina, you can go like tap Wind Sprite and the First Fight's Memoria to drop Oberon and block. And then if your opponent, let's say, uses a spell to try to kill Oberon, you can use the one Fairies Memoria to quick cast Escort and then protect Oberon. So the one floating mana really does help speed up the deck. It works really well. And then for Water Sprite, I wanted to focus the rest of the deck on being really consistent. I wanted every other card I used to just kind of like replace itself or take something away from my opponent so that I don't fall behind. And because there's no Regalias, you already have as like this really heavy consistent deck opposed to just like when you play Regalias and Reflect, you'll like use the draw effect and you'll draw into like a Death Sight and then you have to put it on the bottom of your deck and it didn't really do anything for your hand and now you feel like you're just behind. And I just been like really hating the feeling of running like a fifth of my deck just towards Regalia so I could use Ruler's Memoria. It feels really just gross, and I'd rather just have all these cards that feel super live all the time instead of worrying about having to scry into cards with Reflect that just are more live, I guess. So Water Sprite being able to enter the field and draw me another fairy really helps keep consecutively adding cards to my hand. And then Flame Sprite. So Flame Sprite's the same aspect. Not only is it your main like push to be able to just like drop 2 of these if you search them with Circle of Trust, you can play them with Fairies Memoria and just attack with a bunch of damage, but the tap effect to be able to deal damage to something is also a means of removing cards off your opponent's field. So it's another way to just use your cards to get rid of their resources, and you want to be able to do that as many times as you can so that you're not falling behind, because like I said, that's really the one problem that fairies had. They just sometimes just fall behind when you use like the Reflect version, and I just didn't like to rely on that. So I want to consecutively make sure that all the options I have do something other than push for damage, because fairies don't have a problem doing that anyway. And then 3 Escorts. I was going to play this at 4 because I think this card is like insane, but I always had it with 3 because I play Circle of Trust as well. And so I didn't really feel the need to play 4 of it, but you can if you want to up this and like reduce one of the other ones by 1. You definitely can. This card is insane. But so Escort has quick cast on its own, and it also has flying, which is actually like a really big deal because even though it's 0 attack, it can get buffed up really quickly. And so what Escort does is when it enters the field, you can target a fairy you control, and it can't be like targeted by spells or abilities your opponent controls that turn. And so if your opponent, let's say, uses a kill spell on Viviane, you can just drop Escort and protect it. And the best part is not only does it have quick cast on its own, but even if you're tapped out because you went for like an early Viviane, let's say you go turn 1 Wind Sprite, and then they play their first turn card, and then turn 2 you tap for Viviane and pass, and you're tapped out. Let's say they go like tap for a stone, they're on their second stone, they go space-time collapse, targeting Viviane. You can use Viviane's effect to tap her to put this into the field and protect her, and like your opponent's most likely losing that game. If they waste their turn 2 trying to like catch up to what you do and you protect Viviane with Escort, it just puts you in such a good position that it leaves them so behind. And so this card's absolutely crazy. And then Black Moon's Fairy. Black Moon's Fairy is a really good blocker. The kind of aspect of what you use this card for is if you have like somewhat, like let's say a Flame Sprite or a Water Sprite in your graveyard, and you have a Viviane, and your opponent's kind of trying to ignore your field and just push for damage because they want to kill you before you kill them, you can tap Viviane to summon Black Moon's Fairy, then block the attack from the opponent's Resonator, killing Black Moon's Fairy, and then adding like the Water Sprite to your hand. And it's a really kind of easy way to cheat switching out the Black Moon's Fairy for like a really good fairy. She also has flying and 200 on her own, so she can get buffed up to do damage, and it's really annoying. Like if you have 2 of these on the field and your opponent has like Flame King Shout, they just kind of feel like, man, like if I Flame King Shout, I'm gonna wipe their board, but he's just gonna get his cards back and then still be able to push for damage. So between this and Circle of Trust, it's just really easy to repair your hand. And then Light Sprite. This is the only fairy I run that doesn't immediately net me anything in terms of like advantage. So Black Moon's Fairy replaces itself, Water Sprite gives me a fairy, Flame Sprite can remove my opponent's field, Escort makes my opponent's cards fizzle, so they wasted it. All of these cards just kind of do something, except Light Sprite only heals, and although it's nice to have the extra heal, it doesn't particularly net you any advantage. And I was okay with this at 3 because I still wanted enough fairies to hit with Water Sprite, and I specifically wanted 1-drops, and I wanted to be able to play them, and so I wanted to focus on it just being like light, so that just in case I wasn't hitting any Fairies Memoria and they are somehow consecutively dealing with my Vivianes, I really wanted to just have like a standalone card. And so Light Sprite's been performing good in terms of like pushing for damage or adding damage to the board if I like recover and I have like some light stones and I want to pump up the already colored fairies I put in the field with Viviane. But other than that, it doesn't have any other particular means. It's kind of just like an extra body. 4 of King Oberon. This card is incredible. I even tried to not play this in the Reflect version and I immediately regretted it. Being able to do nothing turn 2 if you don't have Viviane, even if you have like, let's say like a Wind Sprite. Like I said, like if you have the Wind Sprite, you don't have the Viviane and you just pass, it makes your opponent think that you possibly are sitting on a counter like Seal. It makes them think that even if they know you have the Oberon, they still kind of have to either not attack that turn if they think they're going to lose their card because you can quick cast and block, or it just makes them have to play out their turn very carefully. And it's really cool because there's like a lot of really interesting plays that you can do with Oberon that you kind of only notice after you play the card. And there were situations where I would have like 1 Fairies Memoria open and an Oberon on the field and like 2 other fairies, and they were all like recovered, and on my draw phase I would draw Titania. And I was just like, oh my god, right now on my draw phase, because everything has quick cast, I can literally tap Oberon and my other 2 fairies, use the Fairies Memoria as blue to play Titania for 1, and then just recover, and I just got a free Titania. Or there was times where when I did play Reflect, so this is kind of a play that if you use Reflect over Kaguya, this is kind of a really cool play too. But if you have a full field of like fairies, like at least 3 of them, let's say, and like 1 open or 2 open or whatever, as long as you have access to blue, and you have Reflect on the field, you can, if they let's say declare an attack with like a Gwyber, and let's say you have like a Viviane too, so if you summon a fairy, it'll get buffed. You can search the Titania, rest everything because it has quick cast, and then play the Titania, and then everything would get +2, including the Titania, and then you would just block the Gwyber. So there's like these really cool kind of like cheat moves you can do with quick cast that I only noticed how strong they were after I played it. So Oberon is definitely just incredible. I think this card, I underestimated. I knew it was going to be great, but in play it just feels so much better than I thought. Plus like the 400 gets really big when you start dropping fairies. There was times where after like dropping 3 fairies, I'd like swing for 1,000, and I was like, oh man, like that's actually pretty cool. Like I got this card kind of during my opponent's end phase, so I never really saw summoning sickness, and being able to swing for like even just 4 flying is really good. And then the main actual win condition of the deck, of course, the 4 Vivianes. Viviane is just incredible right now. Escort made this card so relevant. Circle of Trust, being able to just search this whenever you want, makes it so that the Reflect isn't necessary, just in my opinion. If you play a consistent kind of list like what I try to make here, you don't have a bunch of like dead fairies in your hand anyway, so you're not desperately trying to just put cards away. I feel like that's also kind of another, I guess like a bad point that's happened with Reflect. Everyone's so comfortable with the added consistency with Reflect that they have this mentality of like, oh, I can kind of make, oh, I don't want to say a bad list because it's not particularly bad, but like I can use techie options and cards that might not be optimal because I could just put it away. And I feel like that logic is really bad because if you essentially make a more consistent deck and you have Reflect, it just boosts it that much more consistent. And I feel like people have gotten too comfortable thinking like, oh, Reflect will just make up for like how bad this is because I could just put away these like options and still have them later. And sometimes that could work, like it's okay to be techie, but in terms of like making this deck without Reflect, it really made me feel like Fairies really could be consistent. They don't have to just be 4 of 10 different fairies and you just have like 10 cards, you know, and you don't really have any other angle to the deck or any other win condition. It's still like around Viviane, but I really was like having fun messing with the ratios, is just making it as consistent as I can. And so of course Viviane is just when fairy enters the field, it gives all other fairies, well, including herself actually, it just gives everything +2/+2. And so, and you can tap her to put a 1-drop fairy into the field, and you just essentially swarm the field and buff everything up and just swing for game. This card is absolutely crazy, and being able to just go Circle of Trust, search Viviane, search Escort, and then when you play Viviane, they can't even do anything about it because you search the Escort. So I think it's ridiculously strong. Viviane is just super powerful. And then Titania, the Prideful Queen. This is another one of the new fairies that I actually, I realized how insane it was going to be, but I didn't actually think it would be that good in fairies. I thought it was going to be kind of like in a Rabbit Kaguya deck, which actually did really well in one of the recent Forcible events. But it's not bad in this deck either, only because of Oberon's Quick Cast. If I open this, I will 100% mulligan it away. Being able to search cards with Circle of Trust just makes it so you don't have to have any of the riskier cards in your hand. There's times where if you do have it, like if you draw into it after mulligan, it's not even that bad depending on your hand, because you can go like, there was times where I would just have like a Wind Sprite turn 1, my opponent then plays a card, and then turn 2 I like summon Viviane, and then, you know, my opponent attempts to kill Viviane and I drop Escort, and then on my turn I just recover, rest all 3 for Titania, and then I have like 2 mana open anyway for it's like Quick Cast and Oberon. So it's not as hard to summon as it seems. Escort really makes it easier because it puts a creature on board while still protecting the other target your opponent was trying to kill. And so you essentially have 2 of the 3 targets you need to play her. So she's just really, really good. You can cheat her in by resting on the cards, and she gives all other fairies +2/+2. So she's definitely great. It also like puts this big threat on board because she's 12/12. And your opponent has to waste all these unnecessary resources to try to kill her. And if you have Escort in your hand, it makes it even more of this like, they just feel like, oh man, like when I finally even try to chip her away, he's just going to use Escort and protect it. And so it gives them like this kind of hopeless feeling of like, if I don't kill this, I'm dead next turn. And it feels really, really good. For Circle of Trust, this card, I have new sleeves, sorry, everything's like sliding around. But this card's actually like one of the main reasons why I was so hyped for this deck. Circle of Trust says you can either search 2 fairies from your deck, literally any 2 fairies from your deck, or you can have all your fairies gain +4/+4 until the end of turn. So it's like, if you have a well-established board, you either kill your opponent faster, or if you have to catch up, it helps you catch up. Like, this card is perfect. There's literally no situation in which this card is not insane. There's times where like your opponent will even use a lot of their resource to kill the Viviane because they had to go through Escort and then attempt to kill it again. And then on your next turn, you just go like tap Wind Sprite and a Light Stone to play Circle, search like a Viviane and something else, and then you have like 3 stones, and then you just play the Viviane and maybe you search another Escort, and they're just like, are you kidding me? Like, I literally just used everything I could to get over that, and you just searched both and played it again. It's like, alright, we'll try number 2. And I think this card is just insane. The +4/+4 is just like such overkill too. Like, as if this card wasn't good enough just by being able to search 2 for only 2. It's like, oh yeah, just in case you're already winning, we'll give you an easier OTK too. Like, this card is just insane. And then for the last card, I decided to run 4 Rewriting Laws. This was kind of a really weird choice because I didn't see myself thinking about using this either. It was kind of weird how it came to. So I had 4 seals in here originally, but even with holding Oberon to quick cast, it wasn't really, like, other than turn 2, seal just felt super dead because it was kind of this aspect of I either seal or I Oberon, and then after turn 2, it was just always about pushing for game, so it never felt as though I had the mana open for it. And so I was trying to think, like, what card would help me in a kind of crappy situation in which where maybe I'm kind of color screwed at times, which doesn't happen that often, but it happens to every deck sometimes. You just hit like 4 of that like 1 color stone and never see the rest. And I was like, so what, I have green, I need something that's green that will help keep my deck consistent and do maybe like help in an angle that I might not have a lot of control in. And I was like, oh, rewriting laws actually seems perfect. This meta isn't counter heavy, so the chance of this getting countered is really low. The only time it would possibly get counters is if you play against Reflect and Reflect negates it. But other than that, like, which most of the time they might even be scared to negate this, because if you have a well-established board, they have to like bounce. You can even attack first, forcing them to bounce, and then play the rewriting laws and come back after. But so rewriting laws says that all your magic stones produce all the colors this turn, and it costs green, which means I have 10 green. So there's no way I can't play this. It also then recovers 2 stones, so it was completely free. And you draw a card, so it replaces itself. So it was that one last card where I was like, this kind of makes it so I have a 36 card deck instead of a 40 card deck. And then on top of that, it color fixes, so just in case late game I didn't hit Fairies Memoria as often, I can still play those Flame Sprites and the Black Moon's Fairy and all the other colored fairies. And then at the same time, like, it's just thinning my deck and making it easier to go through anyway. So it doesn't hurt in any way unless it's countered, which is kind of less likely to happen. You can still kind of bait Reflect into doing that as well. So thanks a ton for watching, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the deck profile. I tried really hard on this deck because I really wanted it to be successful. Fairies have been like just slowly gaining support for a while now, and I'm always super hyped for them, so I wanted to put out a really good list. If you guys did like the list or have any kind of suggestions for it or anything that you want to say, make sure to leave a comment in the comment section below letting me know. If you haven't subscribed yet too, please subscribe, because it makes the videos easier just for you guys. It just comes straight to you. That way you don't have to like worry about when I'm posting or when stuff is going to be going up. Machina is going to be the next deck profile. I'm going to shoot to try to get it in by Thursday, but I have to work early that day, so I might have to be able to wait till Friday. So either way, it'll be Thursday or Friday for sure. And if you didn't hear about my new Twitter, it's in the description below, so you can follow me on there too. It's just easy for you guys to ask me questions there and just kind of follow me and have my ideas kind of just in small sentences instead of these kind of really long videos. Sometimes it's just easier to be like, 2 pictures of these 2 insane combo cards I found, and then me just go, oh my god, and then like it's like, oh cool, that's a cool kind of concept that we didn't maybe see earlier. So definitely subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Machina on Thursday or Friday, and I'll definitely catch you guys next time.